Hey, girlfriends, welcome to another episode of Girlfriends and Goals. We're your hosts, Miosha.
And Samaria.
This podcast is a space where we'll talk about friendships, life goals, a little bit of pop culture, and all things womanhood.
On today's episode, we're discussing how to move on at the end of a romantic relationship. I cannot believe in 92 episodes on navigating like womanhood, we haven't
Yeah.
talked about this before, but we are here. And so we definitely have a good episode in store for you guys today. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please make sure that you are giving us a 5-star rating and consider writing a review. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Also share your thoughts in the comments.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get it started. I'll start with this. So
Mm-hmm.
I heard either Tia or Tamara. I want to say Tamara because she was on the reel, so we would have heard her talk about stuff like this more.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard her saying that she and her friends have this rule where they'd allow the person to cry for 1 week, get all your emotions out. And then after that 1 week, they had to figure out moving forward. And
Mm.
so, yeah, so what do you think of this rule? But also, how long do you think it should take to get through a breakup?
I wonder if that 1 week idea is around like, okay, girl, we've heard about it. It's been a week. You might need to deal with what you need to deal with, but you can't just keep hitting us up
That's
talking about this breakup. I doubt it, but I don't know. I That is something I think about if I was going through a breakup. I wouldn't want to just keep rehashing the same thing over and over for the next 5 months with my friends. But
okay.
either way, I don't know that you could put a specific amount of time, and I feel 1 week is pretty short unless you were only together for a month. And even then, was it a tumultuous month? I don't know. It's just the time frame seems small. That's my
Yeah.
first reaction. A week, say you dated for 6 months, you're
Hmm.
not probably going to be quote unquote over it in a week, unless you had already checked out. That's another thing. Were you already kind of headed out and so you were able to process a bit? I don't know. What's your thoughts on the time period?
Oh, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's way too short. But that's as someone, I love to dissect every feeling. So if you
Mm.
put me on a 1 week like timer, I am sorry, but I have already failed you because there's there's no way. I need to talk about the emotions as they come up. And because I'm like this, I also make space for my friends to do this. Like,
Mhm.
but we can talk about it however long you need to. My advice might change between,
Mhm.
like month one and month eight, for example. I won't be giving you the same advice. I won't be maybe like at month eight, I won't be coddling you maybe the way that I was in the first month. I
Mhm.
would be trying to be okay, let's be strategic here and figure out what we need to do so that we can move past this phase. But yeah, 1 week, it's just not gonna cut it for for me.
And I think it depends on maybe the type of relationship, how
Yeah.
long, what went on,
What
was there a
stage?
yeah, were you like super close friends and then for years and then you dated for 3 months? Okay, well, you maybe can't just count the 3 months if you were friends for a while.
The whole friendship. Yep.
It's an entire friendship that you're losing. So
Yeah.
I don't a week is too short as far as the amount of time. I would think if I were to put a minimum on it,
Hmm.
30 days.
Okay, 30-day minimum.
Yeah, 30-day minimum where
Okay.
even if a friend came to me and was like, "Oh, I'm over it," that's around 30 days where I'm like, "Okay, they could be making progress." They probably are making progress.
Oh man. I would put a minimum of 90 days.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like
Okay.
90 days is like a good time to have experienced almost all of the emotions that come with it. The okay, I'm over this person, or you weren't the person for me anyway. Like you
Mhm.
go through the anger, you go through the oh, could I have done something differently? I think 90 days is a nice good number.
Now, do you think it depends on, I guess, in general, how well you get over stuff? Because I
Oh
think
yeah,
some people, I don't know, they have this ability to just easily move on,
yeah.
not, wallow in their emotions as it's long. I don't know. It's like, are you a person that holds on to stuff? And then also, if they did something crazy to you to cause the breakup, like, does that impact how well you're able to maybe quote unquote move forward?
So 90 days, just so it's clear, is my minimum. Just like it's your 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my minimum. I would give someone that time. If I had to go a maximum, I'm giving about 18 months to 2 years, depending on what it was. Because I think the way that I see life in general
Mm-hmm.
is you might get over something and then something might remind you of it that takes you to that place, and relationships are
Yeah.
things that are grieved. So that's why I would say about 18 months to 2 years, for like a full recovery to be like going through your day and not even considering thinking about
Mm-hmm.
remembering like that person. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
that would be my max. And if you're maxing this out at the 2 years, I would have expected you to stop talking about it probably
See,
before then. Yeah,
yeah, I think as a friend or a support person,
yeah,
I think it is okay maybe to reach your max. It just depends on how they're handling it.
absolutely.
It's like in the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, girl, okay, we can be up late at night. I get you need to work through it, but after a year,
Quick conversations.
we both
Because
go be tired.
because it's just me reminding you, like, okay, so we have discussed this, and remember we said XYZ the last time we talked about it, not in a
Mhm.
rude way, but I think in the late stages, maybe you just need reminders that this was the best thing that could have happened to you. And so,
Mm.
as a support person, that's really all I think that I'm doing at that point.
I want to add too, I think my feelings are different
Mhm.
if it's a relationship, dating, engagement versus marriage with children. So I just want to throw
Mm,
that out there. We're talking in general statements, but
right.
I think we're talking about dating relationships specifically. I think marriage with kids, that adds a different complication to it.
Completely. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So a lot of times people wonder, what can I do to get through this? You just want it to be over. The heartbreak. It hurts. And we could talk about that. But first, let's talk about what we probably shouldn't be doing.
Okay. Do you want to go one at a time so that I'm not
Yeah.
just like listing stuff out?
Yeah.
Okay. First and foremost is check their social media.
Okay.
There's just no need to be up to date about what they're doing. It'll only drive you crazy because they're either pretending like they're moving on and happy and successful and all of that, or they actually are. And you just don't need to expose yourself to them anymore. Now that it's over, I think you have to limit the exposure. So, what not to do would be checking up on their social media.
I'm going to take it a step further and I'm
Okay.
going to say cut all communication with the person,
Hmm.
and not from a place of maybe being angry or upset, but with the goal of moving forward. I would seize all communication unless it's a life, death, emergency, something really crazy has happened. Also, with people who are close to them, I would cut all communication just because at that stage, it's like, how could this realistically help? It just kind of will prolong the process and keep you in the space of thinking of them. I understand processing your emotions, but I just don't think communication with them, unless it's just like a final conversation, hopefully that's already been
Hmm.
had. Once you've had that final conversation, unless it's an emergency, I'm talking they can't call anyone else,
Hmm.
then maybe you talk to them about that specific thing. But as far as the relationship, what they have going on, I just don't think it's a good idea to be in casual communication with someone that you just broke up with,
That's not your
uh,
friend.
because it puts you in this weird space of a new normal that's not actually going to be normal.
Listen, again, that's not your friend.
That
And
is, mm-mm.
and their friends are not your friends either. And I think that's a hard like truth to swallow, because you know how sometimes you have your friends that you both hang around and all of
Mhm.
that stuff, but maybe one person knew them sooner. I don't think they're your friends. So yeah.
Also, it's related, their family. Because sometimes family, especially if you've gotten along well with their family, they
Mm.
can still be reaching out and be like, "Oh, I don't agree with it. You were just the best, future daughter-in-law." Okay, but I'm not going to be.
Yeah.
You don't need a reminder of them through their family
Mm.
telling you how great of a girlfriend or boyfriend you were. Why? That just kind of keeps you in a space of hope.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they may be singing your praises and you're like, "Oh, I feel good about myself." You should regardless. But even the
Yeah.
family too, friends, family, social media, all of it. Cold turkey.
Okay. So that's it. So what not to do would be communicating with them, their cousins, their mama, their best friend, their
The
associates, their
godchildren,
acquaintances.
all of them. And I will say, I do think it would be helpful to communicate to them why. I'm not saying you
Mm,
should just like block them all, stop answering. I think it's okay to say, okay, like the space I'm in, it just doesn't make sense to communicate in the way that we were before, just so they don't feel like they've done something. You don't have to tell them all of your business,
mhm.
but just like, oh, we're not together anymore while I'm processing this. It's probably not for the best that we're talking. Leave it at that.
That's interesting. What else do you feel like you absolutely should not under any under any circumstances do in the event of a breakup?
Go back to them. Jump into a space of half together, half not.
Yeah.
You laugh,
Mhm.
but you'd be
It's
surprised how
true.
many people get caught up
Yeah.
in a friends with benefit situation after the fact.
Ah.
Or you're kind of talking after the fact because the pressure of being in the relationship is no longer there per
Mhm.
se. But it's a way to kind of have contact, have them a part of your life, but
Yep.
then not have the pressures of a relationship. So yeah,
Mhm.
don't find your way into a halfway in, halfway out
Yeah.
situation. Because you hear about people like, oh yeah, we broke up, but kind of slid back in. No, girl,
Mhm.
don't.
Don't do it.
Let it rest.
Ooh, one more thing.
Hmm.
It goes in line with what you said about, not reaching out to or communicating with people, but don't confide in people who are mutual friends. So I personally feel like the friends of your ex significant other aren't your friends, and I think it can be a messy situation where information is going back and forth,
Mm,
and I think that can create a sticky situation. So even if you're having that conversation with, oh yeah, we're not together anymore and I don't know how much I want to talk to you, just don't confide in them. Find a person outside of y'all's circle to confide in,
yeah.
because yeah, I think it just gets messy and information travels.
Yeah. And unless it's probably someone in your close circle, you probably shouldn't be talking about it
Much.
regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than the facts of, yeah, we're not together
Hmm.
anymore. The
Yep.
whys, the hows. Yeah. And that's easier said than done because the
It
friends are like, well,
is.
what happened? You think I'm really telling
that that's the thing. Like people get stuck in the oh what happened cycle.
you? Hmm.
And you want to explain your side of the story, especially if the other person has explained their side and they've misrepresented you. That is
Ooh.
when all the rules feel like they go out the door and you're like, oh no, that's not even how I remembered it happening.
But do you think that that could just contribute to you still being in the headspace of them longer than necessary? And I know what I'm saying maybe much easier said than done, but even engaging in the
Mhm.
conversations keeps you in that space. Realistically, how could you move on
If
if
you're
you're
still
still trying to defend your character and this or that? And
I
I'm
will
not
say
saying I don't know.
I will say the one area where I think it's helpful is when or if the other person has been misrepresenting you and say you guys like ended things and you were like hoping for a friendship or something like that. I think finding out that they misrepresented you gives
Mm.
you a reason to not like them and that could fuel you getting over it. That's the only positive
Oh,
I can ever see coming
yeah.
out of that situation.
Yeah, if you just have to find a legitimate quote unquote reason.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So you had mentioned this about like the final conversation. So I would like to know your views on closure. I don't think we've ever had a conversation about if closure is necessary, if it needs to be sought out, or should everybody try to get it. So yeah, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts on closure?
Uh, I don't and like, what does closure even mean? Because it's like, okay, is it to us in a space where it's like, okay, well, we're on the same page about why things ended, how things ended, what
Mhm.
the plan is moving forward. You've gotten a chance to ask all your questions. Because I think closure and moving forward is kind of hand in hand.
Okay.
Um, and so I can't say that it's necessary because sometimes I don't think you'll have the opportunity
Mm,
because it's very much based off of, I think, if the other person wants to have certain conversations, like you might sit down with someone and in your head, you're going to have this conversation, ask all the questions. But if they're not willing to be honest, take accountability,
yeah.
so it's heavily dependent upon, I guess, their answers and how engaged they are in the
Mhm.
conversation. Um, and so I don't necessarily think that you have to have it, but I think if the other person is genuine, if they want it, you want closure, you're both willing to be open and honest. I do think that it can help you in terms of putting one foot in front of the other
Okay.
because you kind of have a clear understanding. Like there's no what ifs, there's no lingering anything. It's like everything's been put on the table.
Yeah.
So I do think it could help. Not that it guarantees anything, but I will say that in times where I've ended something and I still felt like there was something more to be said or I had questions about something, I've spent time thinking about those things in the moving forward process,
Hmm.
like the why, the how. You don't get a chance to ask the person or have those conversations. So there is some time spent there before you're like, okay, well, it's not going to happen. I don't know, but I just still have to move on with life.
Yeah. I think closure rarely exists. Like
Mm,
I don't know that I think it's a real thing for most
mm,
situations. Now there are some maybe maybe there are some situations where it works out well, but
mhm,
I don't think that's 95% of relationships ending.
mm,
I think closure conversations, especially if they're happening within a few days, weeks, or months of the breakup, I think it's just a waste of time because it
mm,
those types of conversations just bring up more things over time that you have to consider. It's yet
mhm,
another conversation that you have to sit down and dissect. Like, oh, what did this person mean about this? Like, I don't think it closes the deal. I don't think it ends all conversations most of the time. I think you leave with more questions than answers.
mm,
And it has a way of like pulling you into asking more or wanting to reach out more and then prolonging the time that you're supposed to be using to get over this
mhm,
like situation, right? So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the whole, oh, you need closure type of thing. I think
mhm,
you just have to take things at face value, accept it for what it is or what it
mhm.
seems like and keep it pushing. So Netflix has Insecure now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking, Issa and Lawrence, their closure conversation didn't even happen until, what was it, maybe a year later or so, like after
Mm-hmm.
he had moved on from Best Buy, gotten a real job. Like it didn't happen until the leasing the lease was up at the Dunes location,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so all the things that happened from the breakup to then, just like they had several conversations, several run-ins. She tried to like send her friend to get him back and all of that stuff. But that conversation took a while to have, and it required a lot of distance between the two of them. So maybe a year or two, I would say, if you feel like, oh, I just need to have this closure conversation, give yourself a year and a half to 2 years. And if you still need it at that point, then maybe
Mm-hmm.
you actually do need it. But 9.5 times out of 10, I'm guessing you won't need it at that stage.
I think for me, closure is nothing more than you seeking answers to questions that you may have.
Hmm.
Not necessarily that you're going to feel better about it. Obviously, you can't keep circling back on things, but I do think that there is a difference between, hey, I'm breaking up with you. Okay, what happened? Like for some people,
Yeah.
you would be like, okay, well, why? What happened? Not that you'd agree with it, but you
Hmm.
at least would want to know something.
You don't think in most relationships, like the signs are there leading up to it?
I think even if the signs are there, I think having a conversation, like there's nothing like a person saying specifically,
Hmm.
like, this is why I'm leaving. So I don't know. I've been seeing this thing all on social media where it's like women talking about why they're ending their marriages. Uh,
Hmm.
one of the high reasons is just the lack of domestic support that they have within the home from their partners. And you'd be shocked how many women are like, for years, I told my partner X.
Hmm.
And you would have thought that they would have seen the signs of like, hey, basically you being here is like having another child. And so, yeah, the signs are there, but I think there is something too when a woman reaches that point, she says, this is specifically why I'm leaving
Yeah.
versus the signs being there. Because what you may be sending off red flags and signals and everything, um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're understanding it.
So what I'm gathering, and I think of closure differently. Like I think we have different ideas of what closure actually is. So I think for me, when I hear of people talking about, oh, I just need closure, it comes after the reason why the breakup happened being stated. So for
Oh.
example, yeah, so like for example, I'm a wife who's leaving her husband and I
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, I'm doing this for lack of domestic support," right?
Mm-hmm.
And then down the line, he wants to have a conversation of, "Do you feel like what could I have done differently?" So I know that you feel like you you said this to me, but what could I have done differently? At what point do you think you started to consider, okay, I have to divorce if this gets done? Is there a way that we could have compromised on this? Like, I think for me, closure conversations come after maybe the reason is
Mm-hmm.
understood, but you still have questions surrounding that reason, especially questions around how you can fix it or how you could have fixed it.
Mm. Yeah,
That's
in my
that's
mind, once we've talked about the why,
but I kind of agree.
like
That's
what
why I'm
else
like,
is there to oh, you should have helped wash the dishes more. You should have given your child a bath. Like, do you need me to go? I'm not doing that.
yeah, and this is a marriage example, but obviously we're talking more so like dating stuff.
You
And
should have cheated
so
on me. Like, okay. Okay.
yeah, but back to insecure, I don't know why it's on my mind. But
So maybe
they
we feel the same in
okay.
that um I think a conversation could be had. I think it is okay to talk about, okay, this is the reason why,
Hmm.
all of those things. I don't know if it needs to happen 2 years out, but I think once you know the why, I don't think you should keep circling back, nor do
Right.
I necessarily think it's someone's job to help you process
Mm-hmm.
in self-improvement of being a better partner and all of
Exactly.
that. Like you're trying to move on with your life. So,
Exactly. So that's why, and I'm not trying to say they're pointless, but I just think they prolong the process a lot of times unnecessarily because most relationships don't work out. Even like people who are married today, they had probably three, four relationships under their belt before they got married, right? So
mhm,
even in their lives, most of their relationships didn't work out. And so I
yeah.
don't know that closure is, yeah, get a therapist, talk about it with your friends, people who love you and are
Mhm.
and are in your life because of you, not your partner. But I don't know. I don't love the idea of closure
Yeah,
conversation.
once they give you the why, it's up to you, I think, to pick up the baton and take it from there.
But okay, we can say this because maybe we're like in our 30s, right? Do you feel like experiencing heartbreak is different depending on a person's age at all?
Oh, 100%. When you're
Okay.
young, and you're very new to relationships, dating,
Yeah.
like with many things, you could just feel like, oh my gosh, it's the end of everything. And your response can just be very over the top because you haven't had the experience.
Yeah.
You don't know what the other side looks like because you haven't gotten there. But with age and time, you've gone through it a few times.
Yeah.
I do think that you have this sense of like, okay, I'll get through this. It is what it
Right.
is. Now, I will say though, I think some people, even when they're young, depending on what they've experienced in the
Yeah.
relationship, that can affect it more than necessarily just age. Like you could be blessed and get to a mature age and you haven't experienced any crazy relationships, domestic violence, so it's not always a fair comparison
Yeah.
of experiences. Yeah.
I agree. I think most of the time age can determine just because like the longer you've spent here, you've probably had the opportunity maybe to experience more things, but not necessarily. There are people I know younger than me who have more like, relationship experience because they're not ridiculously introverted or whatever the case might be. So yeah, I think a lot of times age, but it is more so an experience thing. I think,
Yeah.
especially at a young age, say early 20s, where you start to like plan a life with a person, or you start to envision, oh, this is what my life would look like. And then that doesn't pan out. I think it can be crushing. Whereas I think when you're older, maybe you go into relationships understanding that, oh, I can really like this person and get along with them well. And for whatever reason, we could still not work out because
Yeah.
we might not be aligned on this one thing that we can't find a way to compromise on. So I think that's what life and experience will give you.
And I think that's a benefit, I think, for women of our generation who are
Yeah.
getting married later. You just have
Mm,
more experience. And it's like, okay, well, even if this marriage does have to end, if you're getting married later, you may have seen other people go through a
yeah.
divorce. Not to say that it makes it super easy, but I think just the experience of alone of having relationships before entering into a long-term relationship. So for example, a young lady getting married at 20 and
Hmm.
then, say she's married until she's 50, that's all she knows, assuming she hasn't had a relationship in her teenage years, versus a woman who maybe got married at 35.
Yes.
Like you would have had, say, 10 to 15 years of relationship experience, and a chance to see other peers around you go through different situations, which I think
Absolutely.
valuable as well, not just your own life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you say breakups have taught you to view your relationships going forward differently? Or do you feel like, "Hmm, I kind of come out on the other end the same?"
No, I think breakups in general, not just mine, but like other people's as
Mhm.
well, because like you said, we often have a community of people who are also navigating relationships and things like that. So we can learn from their experiences as well. And I think it's just taught me people can change and people
Mm.
people will change. And if they change into something that you're not willing to be aligned with anymore,
Hmm.
that's okay. And it doesn't say anything negative about you that you didn't change with them. Because I
Mm.
think a lot of times people assume like, oh, well, it's because I wasn't willing to do XYZ. And it's like, yeah, because maybe you've grown in a different direction, you know? So that's one thing that people change, and relationships don't always outlast the change. Also, with dating relationships, just going in, understanding that nothing is permanent at this stage. Like, it
Mm.
just isn't. Like, so things can change for you, things can change for the other person. Uh, you can see character flaws, or what you consider to be character flaws, later on in life that might pull you in a different direction. So it's not permanent. I think sometimes women go into relationships with a mindset of, okay, this is the one, because we like each other, we get along, it's been working for 6 months or
Mhm.
a year. And so we maybe tend to think of things as being more permanent, but it doesn't always have to be like that. And that's not to say that people have to be like walking on eggshells or waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's
Mhm.
not what I'm suggesting. Like, be in it, be happy, and just understand, like, life is life. Those things can happen. And it's better to maybe be mindful of that than surprised at the end of the day.
Yeah. Something it's taught me is that sometimes relationships coming to an end is the best thing that could happen.
Hmm.
Like, it's a time of grief, sadness, the what ifs, because there is, even I think in the most tumultuous relationships, for some people, they feel like, okay, well, at least I have something, or
Mm,
it's better than the unknown.
yeah.
But from what I've seen, people close to me, sometimes the breakup is the best option and people can thrive after that.
Yeah.
And that sometimes relationships can happen to teach you certain things. It doesn't always have to lead to marriage. I know when you're young or you're at a certain age or space, especially I think being, late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s is like, oh, if this relationship doesn't make it to marriage, then it's a failure. No,
Hmm.
you can learn a lot from that experience, learn a lot about what you like, what you don't like in preparation for
Yeah.
the next relationship or the marriage if that's what you want. Uh, that they don't always have to lead to marriage. And I know it's easier said than done just from the pressure that women experience, especially if you experience a breakup during the time when everyone's expecting that you're going to be getting married or, oh, the ring is coming or, oh, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, just the pressure to stay in something. But
Yeah.
it's okay to have a relationship. It ends, it teaches you something, and then you move on.
Yes. I have one last lesson.
Mm.
Um, to maintain your own life. Like,
Hmm.
just I don't think it's wise to get wrapped up in, and I think this for friendships too, but I don't think it's wise to get wrapped up in any one person in
Mm.
life. And especially if you don't have a ring on your finger, I don't think it's wise to be like, oh yeah, um, this is our plan for what life looks like, or we are going to do this, because at this point, you still living for you. Like, it's you are filing taxes as single. So
Yeah.
just keep your own life, keep your friends around you, um, keep your own hobbies, do things on your own, go on your like little dates with
Mhm.
yourself, whatever, but just keep your own life. At the end of the day, this person is like an addition to the life that you've already created for yourself. You're bringing them in to your life. So don't get rid of the life that you're bringing them into. So yeah,
Yeah.
that would be my last thing.
And it's so important because I think a lot of the relationship content that women consume or that's being put out there, it's
Mhm.
just all this preparation about how to put yourself in the best position to either get a partner, keep them happy. But there isn't a whole lot being said around, okay, when you have that, should a breakup come, or just what about you
Yeah.
when you're in this relationship or in this season? Your wants, needs, and desires don't just evaporate.
Yeah. Also about that type of content, there is no blueprint. I know people who
Mhm.
are the most like friendly people who don't have a partner, and some people who are the meanest people ever and they have one. So it's like getting a partner and keeping a partner is based on really the two people there. Like
Mhm.
you don't need to know what everybody thinks is appropriate for a relationship. You need to know what that person likes and doesn't like and thinks is appropriate and is okay with or whatever. So
Yeah.
all right. So we're going to move on, but make sure if you're watching this on YouTube that you comment down below. Even if you're listening to this on the podcast, find our YouTube channel
Yep.
and comment your thoughts as well. But we're going to move into our last segment, which is girlfriend check in. And today we have a question from a website that I found. And it's, do you typically follow your heart or your head?
My head.
Okay.
Yes. If you know me or you're close to me, I would say more times than not, a more logical person
Mhm.
in just the decisions that I make. That's not to say that I'm not emotional,
Mhm.
but if I were to pick one, it would definitely be me following my head
Mhm.
and not my emotions. Yeah.
Gotcha. I think I'm 70, it may be 80/20, and it depends on what it is. So when it comes to things like love, friendships, I actually follow my head with those 1,000%.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because I think if you are going to be someone who I'm in relationship with, it needs to make sense to me. I think
Mhm.
emotions play some role in that because obviously if it makes sense to be your friend because you look good on paper, but being around you, I feel not so great. Obviously, the heart has to get what it wants in that case.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would say 80/20 head, heart. When it comes to ambitions, I think my heart a little bit more because if my
Mhm.
heart wants it, then my head can figure out how to make it happen. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm the opposite, maybe when it comes to friendships and
Mhm.
family. I think I might lean a bit more with my emotions.
Mm,
It just depends on the situation, what's going on,
yeah.
and I guess the history that's there. I don't know. Even with friendships, like with you, I'd like to think like, oh, I'd be logical, but I probably won't. After this
Really?
long, it's like, I don't know. But thankfully, we've never been put in a position where we'd have to think about that. So that's why I'm like, if it came up, I don't know if I'd be as confident to be like, well, logically, this doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always like a little bit of a pull between the 2, like a tug of war. That's what I was
Hmm.
trying to do with my hands. It's a tug of war because sometimes, your emotions are important. And I do like when people are like, "Oh, this person made an emotional decision." Well, sometimes an emotional decision is what needs to be made because your emotions are communicating things to
Hmm.
you that you need to pay attention to. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thought on that. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the Girlfriends and Goals podcast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Girlfriends and Goals Podcast. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe and don't
Mhm.
forget to rate, review, and share. Until next time, bye.
Bye.